Hello, senior scholars. I'm Professor Tom Mandeville, and I'm going to be guiding you through one of my favorite topics to talk about, the Revolutionary War in the North Country, 1775 to 1777. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself and get you all prepared for what will be happening when our first class meets online on January 28th at 10 a.m. So, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I started teaching mainly American history, but I also teach some political science courses at Clinton Community College in the fall of 1990. So I'm in my 31st year of teaching there. I love to teach. I can't see myself retiring, but someday I will, but that's off in the future. I'm originally from the state of Michigan. I was born and raised in Port Huron, which is about 60 miles north of Detroit. I graduated from Eastern Michigan University, where I majored in American history and political science. I then went on to do my graduate work at Bowling Green State University in northwestern Ohio. My family and I moved here in the fall of 1990, and we're awful glad we did. The North Country is a great place. It was a tremendous place to raise our two daughters, and I thoroughly enjoyed teaching at Clinton and also being smack dab in the middle of the hotbed of history that the Champlain Valley actually is. I consider myself really lucky to have ended up here because there's so much history right in our backyard. Now, also, since I've been here so long now, over 30 years, I consider myself a New Yorker, and I'm proud of it, having lived here and really enjoying our region and the state. Now, as far as my areas of expertise, I've led over 20 workshops for teachers in the North Country over the past 25 years or so, and many of these workshops have focused on either this topic that we're going to be covering or more specific topics related to the American Revolution in the North Country and the Champlain Valley. So I know quite a bit about this subject area, and I'm pleased to be able to share it with you over the next 6 weeks. So that's what I'm all about. As you'll find out, I have a real passion for history. That's why I just love being in the classroom. Under these extraordinary circumstances, it's via Zoom, but we got to do what we have to do until we get through this and we all get our vaccines. So, as far as what's going to be happening on next Thursday, well, not next Thursday, but Thursday the 28th, you're going to, in all likelihood, I assume, receive detailed instructions from the folks that are sponsoring this course on how to download the Zoom app, which we're going to be using for our class. And so I'm not going to go into any details on that. Obviously, if you have any questions on that, you can contact the senior counsel or whoever else is engaged in this. But Zoom is a pretty user-friendly, easy thing to do, and that's what we're going to be doing for our class meetings. So you may want to practice on it a little bit before our actual class meeting if you've never used it before. Now, also, the way that this class is going to work is before every meeting, except for our very first one, which we'll use to cover some introductory material, get to know each other, and get comfortable with the setup so nobody misses anything. the week before classes meet, starting in February, I'll be emailing you links to a couple of video lectures that I'm going to record. I've become pretty good at this since I've been teaching strictly online for 2 semesters now, and I'll be entering my 3rd here in the spring at Clinton, of recording lecture material as if I would deliver it in a classroom, because I'm a lecture-based professor, like all my favorite professors were. In fact, the kids up at Clinton refer to me as the storyteller, and when they come to my class, it's Mandeville story time. So I'll be sharing some of that via recording. Now, so I'll be sending you links to some video lectures that I'll record specific for the material that we'll be covering in the next class that will link you to YouTube where you'll watch these videos. So that'll be happening in the future, and right after our class meeting on Thursday the 28th, the next day or so, I'll send you an email with the links to the video lectures that I want you to take the time to watch before we meet the next time, because I'll explain in detail the information that we're going to cover in the next class, and then we can use our class time more for question, answers, and discussion. So that's how the class is going to work, and you'll get accustomed to it. The main thing you really need to have to participate in a class like this is either a desktop computer that has a camera that you can participate in Zoom with, a laptop that does, or right now I'm using an iPad, is what I prefer for these recordings and to be on Zoom. So that's about the only thing you really need to have. Most of you probably already have it already. Now, as far as there being any sort of textbook for this class, there really isn't. I'm going to provide you with all the information. But if you are interested in getting a book that's a good overview of the Champlain Valley in general, I would suggest this book right here. Guns Over the Champlain Valley by a friend of mine, Howard Coffin. Howard Coffin used to be the chief of staff for Senator Jeffords in Vermont. Many of you may remember when he was a senator a while back in the state of Vermont. He's a history buff. He's written books on Vermonters at Gettysburg and other subjects. And he put together this very detailed look at military sites excuse me, in the Champlain Valley. It's a good overview. It's a great book if you plan on going and visiting any of the sites that I'm going to be talking about during class, because there's a guide for every single one that I'll be telling you about, and also guides to historic sites during the French and Indian War, the War of 1812, and so forth, right here in our own backyard. This is a great book to keep in the glove box of your car if you're traveling around in the summer or whatnot. Now, also in this book, the preface is written by a very famous historian and friend of mine, Edwin C. Bears, who recently passed this past year, who was the chief historian of the National Park Service when I originally met him in the early 90s. Then he was historian emeritus of the Park Service and a very famous leader of historic tour guides for Smithsonian and other groups. He writes a very great preface to this book because he's a friend of mine and Howard Coffin's. So I'd suggest this book if you don't own it. It's a great book. Now, just a little introductory material on what we're going to be doing on Thursday the 28th. The real setup to everything that happens in the Champlain Valley during the Revolutionary War occurred on April 19th, 1775, outside of Boston. the famous Battle of Lexington and Concord. Most of you might remember that from grade school. Your teachers taught you that Paul Revere was riding through the streets of Lexington and Concord, warning all of his fellow sons of liberty that the British were coming, And then the battle ensued between rebels known as the Minutemen versus the British regulars. They fought to a draw, but it was pretty amazing, and most Americans considered that a victory. So that's what's going to set everything in motion, because that happens on April 19th, 1779. And just a few weeks later, the first event we'll be covering in detail in our first class, the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, will happen in May of the same year. And it's because, as you'll find out, and I'll talk about this in more detail later, all the cannon that were basically more or less unguarded at Fort Ticonderoga and His Majesty's Fort at Crown Point. So that was the real target. We'll be explaining that in detail, but that is sort of our jumping off point. Our end point for the class will be the famous battles of Saratoga, because there were two important battles that took place there. If you don't know, you'll find out about. And that was really the end of the military activity in the Champlain Valley, but also, as we'll emphasize in class, it was the real turning point of the American Revolution. It's what turned everything around and really enabled the Americans to be victorious, which I'll explain to you later on. So, that's what we're going to be covering in class. I look forward to working with you all. When I send you this, obviously you'll have my email address, so you'll be able to correspond with me when you have questions or whatever outside of class, or about other materials that I might suggest for you or whatnot. I look forward to this. It's my first time teaching senior scholars. Hopefully it won't be my last. And we're going to have a good semester, even though we're constrained by the pandemic. We'll make the best of it. And hopefully we'll get to meet each other face to face in the not so distant future. So, everybody be safe, wear your mask. If you haven't got your vaccine yet, get it. I'm scheduled to get mine on Friday, and I'm looking forward to it. So I'll get my first shot, and then who knows, by the mid-February, I'll probably have my second, and I'll be all set to go. So, be safe, be careful out there. I'll see you on the 28th. Bye now.